Marie Kondo is the woman that I was referring to earlier. How many of you guys do Netflix? Okay, I probably should have said that you didn't have to necessarily if you didn't want to identify yourself. Because I could then turn around and ask you how many of you binge things on Netflix, especially on snow days and otherwise, and the hands are still going up. Tidying Up is the next one that I'm getting prepared to binge, although Diane and I have now started to get into West Wing and don't realize how I missed that back when it first came out. I'm not going to go political this morning. I will just simply say it's nice to be able to watch a semi-functional government, regardless of what aisle you find yourselves on. It's my sense of peace and joy in the moment. But Marie Kondo's Tidying Up is something that I think I want to get onto next, and I have an evil plot because as I get into it, I'm going to try to get Michael and Amanda and Diane to join me as you're shaking your head, to start trying to do that concept. But I think there might be some merit behind the concept. I don't want to rail against the accumulation of goods and items. We probably have heard that sermon before by countless people. But I was intrigued because as I was going through the little trailer for the show, people were doing the things like, well, I want to find out as I'm going through this process what truly sparks joy in my life. Or a gentleman who says, this process has helped me see things from a completely different perspective. As I shared earlier, I think the overall concept is to go through items. And I've known friends that have been doing this for a while. If they've had to go through a divorce or if they've had to do things where they're trying to get a sense of what things they have that are truly important to them and what things have just been accumulated. I don't know if that's exactly where Jesus was going, but I would imagine that at the end of the passage that Rick just read for us, as Jesus is communicating to those that have gathered around him, I have a sense that it wasn't a Netflix show that he had in mind, but he was still trying to get folks to have a sense of priority. But not only a sense of priority of those things that they had in their life, but a priority of how they should be experiencing life itself. To find joy. And I really do like the idea of joy being that coming together and having a sense of peace about who you are, as you are, flaws and all. And that because of who you are and as you are accepted, you're not having to struggle too hard to be something that you're not. I also think that's why I've had an interest in things like disaster response. I've responded to disasters in the past, both as a military policeman and as a military chaplain, or in leading youth mission trips to all kinds of locations. And so when the opportunity was presented to me to take over this ministry of our wider church for Ohio and West Virginia and northern Kentucky, and even though I knew it was going to be adding a few more hours to my day or my week, when I've had the opportunity of going and sitting with people who have lost so much, as I've been able to sit with them and respond and hear their stories and help them share with me those things that truly bring joy to their life, and as they go through that prioritization and remembrance, it's a powerful moment. And it's a reminder to me that I have all of this stuff that I need to be touching and letting go of, that there are places that some of that stuff can go, that someone can use it right away. There's a sense of that as well when we go over to Good Shepherd, those Sunday afternoons, to be able to share out of a sense of abundance that which other people are struggling to live with or without. I have that sense when I'm at Pinewood Gardens on Thursday afternoons. I have that sense that that's where the church, and I don't necessarily mean this church, but I have a sense that that's where the church itself is at its most effective. When we gather like this, but then when we realize that our worship doesn't end at 11:30. That quite honestly, our worship of God perhaps begins most earnestly when we step out of these doors and into the community around us and into the lives of those that we encounter, especially for those who may be struggling for whatever reason. Is it perhaps our greatest purpose of a church is to help other people perhaps not find happiness, but perhaps find and experience joy? This church is going to be how old? We're at what, 198 right now? Then 199, and then we're going to be on 200 years? It's a lot of years. I've got to be honest, as I've walked through the congregation or the church building, and at times, if there's no one else around, I'm going to admit I even start opening up some of the cabinets. And I'm finding all kinds of stuff. This church is rich in history. I sometimes wonder, though, that if we did a spring cleaning at some point and worked through some of those cabinets and closets, if I picked up something and said, does this now bring memory or does this bring joy? What our response would be. Or if I was to flip the script a little bit, as I'm going to do with our church leadership here next month, and as I'm going to be doing with our church staff in a little over an hour, less than an hour. What brings you joy and what brings a sense of joy and mission to this congregation as we move forward? I want to keep the message fairly short this morning because we also have table. And as a congregation, we celebrate the sacrament the first Sunday of every month. My hope, my desire, but I cannot force the issue, is that as you receive bread and cup, that perhaps in some way you experience joy. You experience belonging. You experience that, as we say within the United Church of Christ, no matter who you are or where you find yourselves on life's journey, you're not only welcome here, you're welcome to receive from here. The last church that I served in a transitional role, we went through this book that I'm now inviting some of you to join me in if you so desire. And it starts today at 1 o'clock. And here's a short commercial break, even if you haven't signed up, even if you haven't gotten the book. And if you want to join us, we start at 1 o'clock downstairs, or Thursday at 6:15. It's challenging because it will challenge a lot of our beliefs or assumptions, or if nothing else, it'll say, if you don't believe X, it's still okay. But perhaps if we begin to think differently on some things, we may find joy. Now I come back to the table. I went through this study with my previous congregation, actually the previous two congregations. But the other thing that I began conversations with on my last church, primarily because I come from a disciples background. And if you're familiar with the disciples of Christ, one of the distinctive features is that every time disciples gather for worship, bread and cup is available. When I posed the question to the last church that I served and asked them, why they served as often as they did. They couldn't really remember why. They had been between pastors and this or the other and yon. And I asked them if they knew what the wider church within the United Church of Christ was inviting congregations to consider and how often. I had the same puzzled look, like they didn't really. And so we got anywhere from quarterly to seasonally to monthly, and I said all of those are experienced in other churches. But the conversation from our wider church is for churches to begin considering what it would look like to begin having table available every Sunday in worship. We've never done it that way before. It would lose its meaning if we did it every week. Who would prepare it and serve it? And would it add 10 minutes to our worship time, where oftentimes the response is for something like that? And after I sat with the logistics questions and the history questions and the tradition questions, I simply then asked, why do you think the invitation is for churches to explore having the sacrament available every week? Anybody want to venture your own answer to that? Okay, so there's a biblical reference to that. Others? Yeah. So it brings us together to think about God and the greater world. Others? Yeah. There's a symbolic thing about receiving Christ on a more regular basis. And to that I would add, especially we within the United Church of Christ, what is our tagline? No matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. Normally is a wonderful invitation for folks who have felt excluded from church for various reasons. Or perhaps they were welcome into the doors, but they weren't welcome to receive. So they've been excluded from table. And so from within the United Church of Christ's framework and perspective, the offering of bread and cup on a more regular basis reinforces for folks that they too are loved as they are, welcomed as they are, affirmed as they are. And then there's the logistical piece of, and not everybody here is here every single Sunday. Perhaps someone works. Perhaps someone travels. And if they miss the first Sunday of the month, it's another until. Did I mention that the congregation that I served has you by a couple of years? They've been proudly serving the Vermilion area for 200 years. You have some catching up to do, but I don't think that's mathematically possible. They weren't ready to just say, fine, let's do that, for some of those logistical reasons. And I'm not here to say, this is what I want us to do. That's a conversation for us to have as a church. What we ended up doing, and what I brought to church leadership, and I believe I received a, yeah, you can try that, is that every Sunday, sacrament was available. I blessed it at the end of my message. And as the congregation went forth, those that wanted to receive came forward to receive sacrament before going out. We started with 3 people. And I had people say, we told you. Not all my ideas work, by the way. The following week, we had 12. People realized what we were doing, and by the following week we had 35. And by the time I left, we were at about 3 or 5 who didn't come to receive. I lift this up not to push something through. That's not my position. It is to offer up an invitation, or for us to realize that I think people are wanting to come to experience something deeper when they arrive here at church. I truly believe people want to come and feel loved and affirmed and accepted. I think people come here because they want to experience joy no matter what they're facing in their life. And I am a believer. I am a believer firmly that the sacrament of bread and cup that has united the Christian tradition since its inception is a way to do that. We do the Lord's Prayer every Sunday. We sing the doxology every Sunday. Therefore, I don't know if there's merit to say if we do something every Sunday, it loses its meaning. I do know that the one thing that we can do every single Sunday is to continue to say, you know what, I said it with the three of you. Do you remember what it was that I had you guys repeat back to me at the end of the children's message? It's the youth message this morning. Do you guys remember what I asked you to repeat back? I am welcome here. What was that? I matter, and I am loved. Can we affirm that to everybody that comes in here? Whether it's through table or any other way. Can we affirm that for whoever we encounter when we go out the doors from here? Can we tell people they are welcome, that they matter, and that they are loved? As we're celebrating this right now, the first Sunday of the month within the worship service, I sometimes will pull a variety of different liturgies. Just because it gives you an opportunity to see the beauty of communion liturgies that are out there. And so, as we sing ourselves to the table, I'll let you know this will be very different liturgy for you than you've had before.